Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to an ambush stream, an informative ambush stream, a news ambush stream. As of tomorrow, the vaunted Title 42 will be ending in America, a not immigration law that became an immigration law, and there are some oncoming ramifications for this event. And as I've been paying attention off and on to border issues for the last several years, I thought I'd go over the details of it from I looked at a couple of articles about the subject today, and the one from Politico kind of gives the best, I thought, overall and all-around analysis of what Title 42 is and soon to be was, what its effects have been, and what its absence may entail in the coming months and years. Or if it's not reinstated in some way. But we'll get to that too, I'm sure, in the article. But before I get there, who's joining me for this surprise stream? John Miller, Mike Savage, Ost Zan, JMK, Miranda Stone. Who else is here? Corey Suzuki, Simic Magic, Joel McLaughlin, Robert Pincus, Kay Scholl, and Hammond Beans. Good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. So as of May 11th, Title 42 is going to end. What was, for the sake of things, Title 42? And from Politico, why people are freaking out about Title 42? Well, let's find out. Biden's decision to send 1,500 active duty troops to the border struck some experts as a sign the administration isn't ready for the transition. Here we go. The pandemic-era policy used to block migrants at the southern border is coming to an end this week. Lifting so-called Title 42, it's not so-called Title 42, that's effectively its name, I don't know why they call it so-called, will mean a major policy shift, one expected to draw an increase of asylum seekers to the U.S. and scrutiny over how the Biden administration will handle that influx. Officials have had more than 2 years to prepare for this moment, but President Joe Biden's recent decision to send 1,500 active duty troops to the border struck some immigration policy experts as a sign the administration isn't ready for the transition. Criticism has poured in from both Republicans and Democrats, yet combating the expected crisis can't truly be resolved without immigration reform, unlikely in a deadlocked Congress that has failed for decades to address outdated laws. Now, I haven't read the entirety of this article. I've skimmed over parts of it and things. I'm curious to find out if they detail what laws are outdated and what needs to be reformed. And that's not me, being skeptical that reform is needed. I think it is, but I'd be curious about the details. While the Biden administration braces for what's to come when the border policy expires on May 11th, that's tomorrow, here's our effort to bring you up to speed on the latest. All right. What is Title 42 and how did we get here? The government has used Title 42 to turn away asylum seekers more than 2 million times for more than 3 years, but it's not actually an immigration policy. Section 265 of Title 42 of U.S. Code addresses public health, social welfare, and civil rights. In March 2020, the Trump administration ordered the CDC chief to implement the Title 42 authority and turn people away at the border on public health grounds. Then CDC Director Robert Redfield issued the first order on March 20th, just days after a national COVID emergency had been declared. Redfield extended the order for another 30 days in April. He renewed it indefinitely in May. Flash forward to August of 2021. The Biden administration, prompting a wave of backlash from immigrant advocates and Democrats, rolled out its own Title 42 order, the one currently in place. Now, just as an aside, if I recall correctly, and I'm happy to be corrected, during the presidential campaign, Joe Biden, the candidate, railed against Trump's immigration policies as, I think, racist and or xenophobic. But then, of course, when he comes into office, he effectively has to stand up those same laws because there wasn't a better solution to the problem at the time. And even with the COVID emergency effectively having been let pass officially, they're still trying to find ways to effectively keep Title 42 active. Maybe the article will get to that. But there was a notable change under this order. Now the policy could end in one of two ways, either via the expiration of the HHS public health emergency or the CDC director's determination that it was no longer necessary, quote, whichever occurs first. The measure has done little to resolve the humanitarian crisis at the southern border, as a growing number of migrants from Central America continue to flee violence, poverty, and economic and political instability. What's happening now at the border? Earlier this year, the White House announced it would end the public health emergency on May 11th, therefore bringing Title 42 to an end. Until recently, a series of court challenges, including one that went to the Supreme Court, made the policy's fate uncertain. But once the Biden administration announced its intent to end the public health emergency, officials began intensely planning around the May 11th date. And what have those plans entailed, might I ask? May is historically the busiest time of year for migration. The Department of Homeland Security has predicted border agents could see as many as 10,000 crossings a day, and Texas border officials have already issued emergency declarations. That's a little bit lower than one of the other estimates I read recently, which was 13,000 crossings a day. So it's somewhere in that range or more. Who knows? El Paso Mayor Oscar Leeser tried to reassure the public of the area's safety during a news conference last week, acknowledging the growing number of asylum seekers sheltering in El Paso and surrounding communities. Okay, unless they come back to it, and I don't think they do, the El Paso situation is far, far more dire than this article lets on. I should probably find an article about El Paso to talk about. Maybe I'll do that for the Sunday stream. The situation in El Paso over the last several months, or years really, has only gotten worse. And with the passing of 42, or I should say the expiration of 42, it's not going to get better. Let's see. What is the Biden administration's plan for immigration? To deter potential migrants once the order is lifted, the administration will rely on a new rule that will bar most people from applying for asylum if they cross the border illegally or fail to first apply for safe harbor in another country. Okay, so if you enter the country illegally, like let's say you're coming directly from Mexico to the United States and you cross the border illegally, you are banned from seeking asylum. You're effectively nullified from seeking asylum, period, which would be something. Because several of the stories I've covered in the past had to do with people who had lived in the United States for perhaps decades, and then upon being discovered, then applied for asylum retroactively. And then they went through the process, and during the course of the process, they were allowed to stay in the United States. If they put this new rule in, if you're caught, you don't get a chance at all to apply for asylum if you enter the country illegally. All right. Administration officials said the rule, or fail to first apply for safe harbor in another country. Now, that's the other part, too. If you're coming from, say, somewhere else other than Mexico, let's say you're coming from Guatemala or Panama or something, if you cross any other border illegally, if you don't actually have permission or officialdom to have been in the countries that you've passed through previously to get to the U.S. border, that also invalidates your chance of seeking asylum, which is, I don't necessarily disagree with that one. That's pretty good too. Administration officials said the rule, a version of a Trump-era policy often called the transit ban, would be published Wednesday for public inspection. I don't have it in front of me. Migrants who get an appointment through the One app set up by Customs and Border Protection will be exempt, officials told reporters in a call Tuesday evening. Yes, the One app, which has been notorious recently for crashes and errors and delays and all types of things. But yeah, so if you are caught at any point in the process of coming to the U.S. border or in America, and you are found to have entered the country illegally or entered any other country in between illegally, you're out of luck. That's harsh but fair, I would say. Thank you, Derek LaRue. Thank you so much, as always, for your generosity and support. I really, really appreciate it. Hope you're having a good Wednesday. I have to remind myself it's Wednesday. And I hope this meets your generosity. Thank you so much. Oh, and GMK just wants to say hello to Brittany. Brittany is Brittany Holland. Hi, Brittany Holland. Hope you're doing good. Let's see. Migrants who get an appointment through the one app set up by customs, will be exempt, right? The administration will also expand expedited removal processes under Title VIII, the decades-old section of the U.S. Code that deals with immigration law. This allows the government to remove from the country anyone unable to establish a legal basis, such as an approved asylum claim. It would bar these migrants from the country for 5 years. So again, if you're caught in the country and you don't have a reasonable excuse for being here, you're out. And at worst, or at least at best, I suppose, depending, you have to wait 5 years to try to make another claim, such as an approved asylum claim. Now, the reason I pause on that slightly is because I've covered at least one story in the past where people talked their way out of being arrested and or deported on the claim that they had an asylum claim in process. So I'm wondering, I wonder what happens in that scenario. Don't know, be curious. Quote, the border is not open. It has not been open, and it will not be open subsequent to May 11th, unquote, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said during a press conference Friday. It may not be open, but people are going to still treat it like it is. Last month, Mayorkas and Secretary of State Antony Blinken also announced plans to establish regional processing centers in Guatemala and Colombia. The timeline for these centers is unclear, though administration officials on Tuesday said they plan to stand up more than 100 facilities throughout the Western Hemisphere. Let me read that again for those in the cheap seats. Administration officials on Tuesday said they plan to stand up more than 100 facilities throughout the Western Hemisphere. The administration will launch an online platform, in the coming days for migrants to make appointments at a processing center near them. I still find this incredible. I'm not quite sure what to think about it, but I did a video on the initial reporting on this advent last week. But for summary, the United States is going to establish little outposts in other sovereign nations that effectively represent ports of entry for the United States, where people can come to in those countries to start the process of applying for asylum, residency, etc. Again, little U.S. embassies, but are specifically geared towards border concerns in other foreign countries. Now, one of the things they don't mention here, or at least I don't see it, is that it is more than likely that what we're seeing happen at the southern border right now, with Title 42 in place, with people gathering along the border, and you have these little camps, these shanty towns being set up as people wait for their opportunity to try to apply for asylum or get across the border. And these little setups have led to, humanitarian crisis is the phrase, but we're talking assaults, crimes, all types of nasty stuff happening down there as desperate people are being taken advantage of or taking advantage of each other. It is likely, as was reported in the other story I read, it is likely that at these processing facilities, similar camps will start building up, depending on how far away they are from people that want to get out of the country. There are several dangers to this. If I'm trying to escape the country of my birth because of political pressure or because of gangs or because of cartels, and there's a centralized location where those trying to flee the country can be found, why wouldn't bad actors camp out and monitor those locations for possible targets or retribution? Secondly, if I'm someone who, I don't know, has a job of smuggling people across the border, well, now I have a centralized group of potential customers that I can try to take advantage of. There's all sorts of problems that I see coming about with these facilities, these border extensions in other countries. And I don't know. Maybe it'll be a good thing. Maybe it'll be a disaster. I'm very curious to see how it goes on, and morbidly curious to see how it develops as time goes on. U.S. international partners, including the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and the International Organization for Migration, will screen migrants at these centers and determine if they qualify for entry before the migrants move on to the U.S. southern border. If eligible, migrants will be referred for refugee resettlement or other lawful pathways such as humanitarian parole programs, family reunification, or existing labor pathways. Migrants will also receive local information about host countries and available social services. So yeah, this is all to attempt to reduce the amount of people coming directly to the border or crossing all these other borders, etc. Now, on the one hand, the benefit is, let's pretend for a second they work perfectly. The benefit is you have people who are not going to be risking their or their children's lives crossing thousands of miles of territory and going through however many dangers exist between different borders or trying to go through it illegally, either through smuggling operations or elsewise. So it's possible, and my fingers are crossed, it's possible that these could effectively save lives in the long run. So let's hope for that. But I also find it a very bizarre solution, or at least an attempt to mitigate the problem. But I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Officials also announced the expansion of the family reunification parole program to include Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Colombia, a program previously only available to Cubans and Haitians. They are also increasing the number of applications available on the CBP One app for migrants in central and northern Mexico. The efforts to expand legal pathways and expedite processing will be paired with deterrence measures in an effort to build upon the humanitarian parole programs for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, which officials tout as a success story in bringing border numbers down. A success story for bringing border numbers down. The number of contacts and crossings and everything else, last I checked, have gone up exponentially month over month for the last couple of years. How have they reduced? Do we have some numbers on that? Can we be shown those statistics? Officials tout. I'd like to see some evidence. The program for these groups will continue, officials said, including the expulsion to Mexico of those who try to enter the U.S. unlawfully. All right. The administration is also reprogramming existing DHS funding to manage the border. Reprogramming. Okay. You mean like redistributing or something? Reprogramming. All right. CBP has opened up 2 additional holding facilities. Oh, you mean detention centers? And Immigration and Customs Enforcement is increasing deportation flights, an official said Tuesday. DHS is also poised to deploy up to 1,000 asylum officers to manage credible fear interviews starting Thursday. The department has also deployed hundreds of personnel from other agencies, and officials said they have 400 volunteers on deck to help, quote, manage what will be challenging conditions in some of our facilities, unquote. I have a feeling that is an example of the British art of understatement right there. Credible fear interviews. I have a credible fear of stuff. Yeah, this is something that I was talking with somebody yesterday about, actually. A misconception that is often professed by advocates for immigration policy and more lax immigration policy. Being an asylum seeker does not mean you get to stay in the country. It means you have to get processed and your case has to be heard and analyzed, whether or not you qualify. Just because you come to the border, just because you say that you're in trouble, etc., does not mean you eventually get to stay permanently. It means that your case has to be reviewed, and you could still be deported if the evidence you bring with you or that is able to be found or your claims are not found to have any substance. That's the thing. But all of those claims still need to be processed. So every time somebody comes to the border and says they're an asylum seeker, they have a right under the Constitution to have their case heard effectively. And that's what's clogging up, in part, a lot of our systems and resources. But it's not a free pass, and it doesn't mean you will get to stay. Anyway, but just on Sunday, Mayorkas continued to raise alarms about the lack of resources. Quote, I just want to be clear that we are working with significant constraints, Mayorkas said Sunday on Meet the Press. Quote, we need people, we need technology, we need facilities, we need transportation resources, all of the elements of addressing the needs of a large population of people arriving irregularly at our southern border, unquote. So, CBP and DHS don't have the resources they need to tackle this problem. And you know that because the head of it is on the public Meet the Press begging for help. Not a good sign. Why are troops being sent to the border? The Pentagon announced last week that about 1,500 members of the military will be sent to the border starting this week. They'll join roughly 2,500 National Guardsmen already deployed there. DHS requested the deployment, and the troops, mostly soldiers, Marines, and a small number of airmen, will focus on administrative functions to free up Border Patrol agents to handle the influx. So they're temps. Okay. The troops won't be allowed to fulfill any law enforcement roles and won't be in direct contact with migrants. The deployments are expected to last about 90 days. Okay, so May, June, July. So by August, all of these temp workers taking up the administrative duties to free up everybody else are going to go away. And then you got to go back to your regular job, I guess. All right. The Pentagon's move continues the trend of presidents, going back to the George W. Bush administration, using troops to fill in for the personnel-strapped Border Patrol. Still, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, criticized the move, calling it, quote, unacceptable, unquote, and, quote, the militarization of the border, unquote. Well, Bob, I guess my question to you would be, what do you propose in the alternative? There's going to be 10,000 to 13,000 more estimated contacts at the border after tomorrow. So what do you expect to have done? Quote, there is already a humanitarian crisis in the Western Hemisphere, and deploying military personnel only signals that migrants are a threat that require our nation's troops to contain, unquote. Hey, Bob, it's not about feelings. It's about pragmatism. There aren't enough people at the border to manage this. And so the path of least resistance is taking the people who are already bound to service for the federal government. What do you propose in the alternative, Bob? Quote, nothing could be further from the truth. Okay, Bob, I want you to go take a tour of El Paso. I want you to go take a tour of El Paso right now and imagine, if you will, for a moment, that the conditions in El Paso will start to spread further north into the border states and onward over the coming months. I want you to think about that for a second. Okay, now, as far as a threat, talk about a humanitarian threat, Bob. Talk about an economic threat, Bob. Talk about a social threat, Bob. Even if every single person coming across the border in any other way or shape or form abides by the law, they still need shelter and food and services. Okay, who's going to provide that, Bob? Okay, well, you have a problem with the look of having military personnel on the border. All right, Bob. What do you suggest in the alternative? How do you answer Mayorkas when he says he needs people? Where are you going to get the people, Bob? Or are you going to open up New Jersey as a landing zone for anybody that wants to come north from the border? I mean, if you don't want the military taking on it, well, why don't you offer up your state, Bob? Oh, boy. Just how bad things could get and for how long is unknown. The White House has been anxiously awaiting May 11th, but some How am I losing my voice? Oh, yeah, that's right. Pepperjack, you my only friend, but some administration officials expect border crossings to settle down in the coming weeks once the new policies are fully up and running. Well, I guess it helps to be optimistic, But I guess we'll see how that turns out. I mean, admittedly, the if you cross a border between here and backwards to South America without permission, if that vetoes your ability to stay in the country, regardless if you enter the country, like let's say you enter the country legally into the U.S. on asylum, but then you're found out to have passed through several other borders without a permission, you're invalidated and you're deported. I guess maybe that'll help. Maybe that'll deter people. Probably not, because if you have desperate people willing to break the law in the first place. House Republicans are expected to pass a hardline immigration bill, H.R. 2118, as early as Thursday that would codify Trump-era immigration policies. That's probably not going to pass. Or I should say, it might pass in the House. It's not going to make it through the Senate. Among them, the much maligned Remain in Mexico policy that required many asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while awaiting U.S. hearings on their requests for safe haven. The Democratic-controlled Senate is unlikely to take up the bill, so it's kind of a moot point. But Senators Kristen Sinema, Tom Tillis, and Joe Manchin and John Cornyn have introduced their own legislation, Senate Bill 1473118, that would extend the Title 42 authority for 2 years. Their pitch isn't expected to move this week. Yeah, just kick the can down the road. It doesn't solve anything. I mean, it would give the Biden administration more time to prepare, I guess, but they've had 2 years to prepare already, and what they're planning on doing, I don't know if it's going to be of any use, really. For now, it seems the next major obstacle would come from the courts. As soon as July, a federal judge in Texas could block the Biden administration's humanitarian parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. Uh-oh. For now, Mexico has agreed to accept 30,000 deportees per month as long as the U.S. continues to accept a reciprocal number of migrants via parole. Okay, but if the U.S. can no longer hold up its end of the bargain, the future of the U.S.-Mexico agreement, a key pillar of the Biden administration's post-Title 42 plan, could be in jeopardy. So, in summary, it's one giant mess. Now, just for the sake of clarity here, I don't think any administration, Democrat, Republican, or otherwise, given the circumstances, would necessarily have some sort of magic wand solution to this problem. But finding out the origins of the migration crisis was something that Biden put up at the front of his administration, I believe in February of 2020, when he assigned that task, more or less, to Kamala Harris, and here we are. So, yeah, as of tomorrow, somewhere between 10,000 to 13,000 more people, that's on top of what's already happening, are expected to make contact at the border as Title 42 ends. And certainly illegal crossings will not stop, because people who don't care about following the law aren't going to care about new laws put in place to put more punishments in place. What effect will this have? Will the processing centers in the various other countries have an effect on mitigating the problem? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to find out. But yeah, so there you go. That's the latest and greatest on Title 42 ending tomorrow. And we'll see in the coming months what the effect will be. Let's see. Now I'll go to the chat real quick before I start wrapping things up. Ham and Beans, Pepper Jack, you're my only friend, might be the saddest sentence I've ever heard. Well, it's actually a takeoff from a quote from the movie Half Baked with Dave Chappelle, where he says, "Abba Zabba, you my only friend." That's what that is. It's a tribute. It's a tribute. Brittany Holland, also Biden, it's going to be chaotic for a while. Yeah, it is. It is. I love the quote from Bob Menendez, though. It's like, oh, we shouldn't have the military down there. That makes it seem like these migrants are a threat to America. Well, A, that's not why they're being sent down there. They're not having any contact with the migrants in the first place. They're not standing there with their guns drawn or something. They're back in the office doing administrative work, so you have no idea what you're talking about. But let's say they were down there. Let's say they were down there to do that. Okay, well, listen to DHS Mayorkas, and what would your answer be to him? He needs people. He needs resources. What are you going to do, Bob Menendez? How are you going to help out Mayorkas in his needs and his wants to try to solve or at least mitigate this problem? We can't send the military down there. No, that's a bad look. That sends a bad message. Come on, give me a break. Let's see, who else here? Let's see, Brittany Holland, no solutions ever provided. It's a good sentiment, but that's all it ever is without any answers on how to actually help fix the problem. Well, here's the thing. I don't know that there's any fixing of this, right? The problem stems from other countries that are so bad and so just without hope to their citizens that they're trying to make their way to some place where they could possibly have an opportunity at a better life. I can understand that instinct and that desire. I mean, we're talking Maslow's triangle kind of stuff here. Does that mean that everybody coming up from another country is of good intent, let's say, or just honestly trying to make a better life for themselves, that they're no bad actors? Of course not. But that's the problem. You have to filter through and try to determine who's actually here legitimately, who's been brought here illegally, if a child is left at the border alone, or have they been smuggled there? Is there something else going on? If somebody shows up with a child, does the child actually belong with that person? All of these considerations, all of these questions, all of these investigations have to take place on a case-by-case basis. And when you've got 10 to 13,000 additional such instances happening after tomorrow, by estimates, and you've only got 2,500 people along the border, plus some troops they're bringing in, it beggars belief how any of this is going to work without a massive national undertaking and some major changes taking place in these other countries, which I doubt it's going to be helped by anything we're doing. Nothing seems to have helped so far. And really comes down to the other question. Is it our responsibility to try to, quote unquote, solve the problems of other countries to the point where it stops their migration? I don't know. So is Title 42 good? Is it bad? It's a thing, but its absence is going to cause some major changes in the near future. And that's what I'm concerned / curious about. It's sort of like an oncoming storm. There's nothing you can do about it. You can try to prepare for it as much as you can, but ultimately it's completely out of your hands. So, again, morbidly curious to see what happens. But as a result of the advent of the ending of Title 42 tomorrow, I decided to make tomorrow kind of a theme day for TED Excellence. And I found a talk about the immigration crisis, at least tangentially. It's called How U.S. Immigration Laws Encourage Domestic Violence. I think I'd heard that theory professed before on one of my previous Expatriate game videos. You can find that playlist on my YouTube channel. But I never heard it detailed specifically as to how that works. So I'm curious to find out about that. That'll be tomorrow, Thursday, at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern here on the channel for TED Excellence, where I take a look at off-brand TED Talks for information and education. I call it edumacation, because why not? Also, I happen to have, if you didn't already know, a Discord server where you can come on and talk about, well, my shows and or my series and or, stuff like anime plotline proposals, because that's happened once or twice. Putting a link to that in the, whoops, that's the wrong link. That's a YouTube link. What's that for? I wanted to get, I don't know what that link is, so I'm going to delete that real quick because I don't know. What was that link to? I wanted the Discord link. Give me the Discord link. I copied and pasted the Discord link. Copy that. And there. Okay. Discord link's in the chat. And if you'd like to join the Discord, just click on that link. You'll end up on the Say Hello landing channel. And all you have to do in that landing channel to affirm that you've watched the show is to say the secret word. And today's secret word is 42. The answer is 42. Just say 42 there, and we'll know that you watched the show, and we'll let you into the Discord, and you'll be a member there. Also, another programming note. I now have a date for the next Living on Borrowed Crime. I can't announce it yet because I still need to confirm at least one other guest before I say for sure. But at least I know Matt Orchard will be appearing on that stream. It will be near the end of May. I'll have a more firm date out as soon as I can say for sure that I've got a couple other guests lined up, or at least one other guest lined up. So be on the lookout for that. Follow me on Twitter for that information when it comes out. I'm at scribe_light. And with that, everybody, before you leave, please consider leaving a like if you liked the stream. If you didn't like the stream, leave a dislike. I appreciate your engagement either way. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts on the subject matter. And at the last second, before I say anything else, thank you, Miranda Stone. Thank you so much always for your support and your generosity. I really do appreciate it. As always, everybody be sure to thank Miranda Stone for being a moderator, not only of the streams, but also of the Discord server and all the help and work she puts in on that. Thank you so much, Miranda. But with that, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the show. Moderators, speaking of which, thank you so much for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. I really, really do appreciate it. Everybody have a good rest of your Wednesday. Hope to see you Thursday night. I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.